Number 10. Beast, member of the X-Men. Hank McCoy, aka Beast, shows signs of being a mutant from a young age. Beast has always been plagued with a sort of Jekyll-Hyde problem, feeling as though something dark resides below the surface of his intellect, waiting to escape. As scary as Hank looks though, whether it be a strong, brutish-looking man or the razor, sharp tooth, and claws Blue Beast we know today, he is often the last one to jump into the fray. Known for his extreme intelligence, Hank is often presented as a practicing pacifist, meaning that he does not believe in fighting and prefers to keep the peace. A gentle giant. This belief came out of him once he gave into his instincts when he was drugged in X-Men Hidden Years and as a result almost killed Kraven the Hunter. However, if you want to see a darker version of Hank, check out the whole Dark Reign storyline starring Dark Beast, an alternate from Earth 295 who is a cruel scientist and geneticist working for Norman Osborn. This version of Beast proves how devastating a villain our Hank could be. Number 9. Superior Spider-Man, or more specifically Otto Octavius as the Superior Spider. What could be more scary than a supervillain in a superhero's body? Especially when that supervillain is trying to do good. We meet Superior Spider when Doc Ock's body is failing and he is dying. After battling Spider-Man, he is on the brink of death when Parker takes him to the hospital. However, using Mind Swap technology, Doc Ock is able to trade places with Parker and now occupies Spider-Man's body. During the Superior Spider-Man storyline, we see Doc Ock as Spidey do a lot of good, but in his own devastating way. Doc Ock adds arms to his spider suit and heads out to change the world after changing his mind about his original villainous intentions. Doc Ock is almost obsessed with being a better Spider-Man than Peter Parker, which makes him more ruthless and makes him more reckless. During his time as Superior Spider-Man, Doc Ock manages to murder Massacre and blind Vulture, all while saving a whole lot of people. Definitely a hero I would not want to tangle with. Number 8. The Punisher, aka Frank Castle. Frank and his family are murdered for witnessing a mob killing, but even though he should have died, Castle somehow manages to survive the shooting. He is an anti-hero and former soldier motivated by avenging the death of his family. He is not afraid to kill and often goes into any fray heavily armed and ready to take lives. To him, delivering death is also delivering justice. Not a superhero you would want to be on the wrong side of. In the 1994 crossover comic Deadly Nights, Punisher even terrifies the Joker and would have killed him if not for Batman's intervention. In alternate universes of the comic, he has successfully killed the Marvel Universe twice without hesitation, once as a result of being the lone survivor of a zombie-like virus, and the second time because his family were the casualties of a fight involving superheroes. And then Cyclops tried to apologize really badly for their death. And you don't mess with Frank Castle's family. Number 7. Black Bolt. Born into the House of Aegon, Black Bolt is inhuman royalty. His parents, being lead geneticists, exposed him to mutating mist while he was still in his mother's womb. He was born with a quasi-sonic voice. In other words, simply by speaking, he could level a city. Imagine accidentally sneezing achoo and blowing up your house. Scary. In fact, up until he was 19, he was kept in a soundproof room in order to protect his people while he gained more control over these abilities. When he was finally permitted to roam free, he discovered that his brother was planning to make an alliance with the Kree and betray their people. He shouted out to stop a Kree ship from leaving, and as a result, the ship came crashing down on the Inhumans Parliament building, killing his parents and making Black Bolt their new leader. Throughout the comics, we have seen devastating use of Black Bolt's powers. In War of Kings, he even managed to use his quasi-sonic abilities to rip a hole through space-time, among other things. Number 6. The Thing, aka Ben Grimm. Weighing in at 500 pounds, one of the scariest superheroes in town, it's clobbering time. Ben Grimm gained his powers after being persuaded to pilot for Reed Richards' test flight into space. Not knowing what to expect from the cosmic rays they would inevitably encounter in space, the test team were surprised to find they were mutated by the rays, resulting in each team member gaining superpowers. These four became the Fantastic Four. Ben Grimm himself grew huge and his skin changed to rocks, causing him to take up the name The Thing. One of the scariest things about The Thing is not actually his strength or powers, but his mental instability. The Thing often discusses how unhappy he is, how he wishes he could die, and his self-given name, The Thing, reflects how he feels about his monstrous appearance, that he is just a thing. These feelings often lead to reckless and violent behavior. He is quick to anger and his reactions are often severe unless his teammates can talk him down. Number 5. Deadpool, aka Wade Wilson. Wade's past is elusive in the comic book world and seems to change slightly every time Deadpool retells it. However, it has been confirmed that he is Canadian, and whatever happened in his childhood had obviously left him troubled and mentally unstable. As a result, he grew up to be an insane and cold-blooded assassin for hire. And trust me, you do not want to be on his hit list. Wade found out he had cancer and was terminally ill, and was resigned to dying until Weapon X came along and cured him by granting him regenerative healing powers. Deadpool later ended up being tortured at the hospice, and it was the Deadpool that the members of the staff at the hospice ran that inspired his anti-hero name. Wade Wilson is often perceived as being pretty unstoppable due to his determined, albeit mentally unstable mind, and regenerative abilities. He can be ripped in half and still keep going, as demonstrated in the Deadpool 2 movie. Deadpool has also defeated the Hulk even, outsmarting him in the 1997 comic Deadpool Volume 1 Issue 4. Granted, Deadpool doesn't kill Hulk, but he does defeat him. And like Punisher, he is also known for killing the Marvel Universe. Twice. Number 4. Phoenix. Before there was Dark Phoenix, there was just Phoenix. Phoenix is an old entity that Jean Grey connects with in order to protect the X-Men. Phoenix connects with Jean Grey's consciousness and bonds with her, adopting her form and memories. The Phoenix Force carries with it an untold amount of power, and it is this version of Jean that is one of the most powerful, save for Dark Phoenix. Granted, what is so scary about this version of Jean is just that, the threat that at any moment Jean's consciousness could lose control over this insane amount of power and become Dark Phoenix, which wasn't so scary until we met Dark Phoenix in the comics and, understandably, got a little scared. We are talking about a level of power that grants Jean Grey omnipotence and makes her immortal. I mean, how many times has she died now? 10? Is it more than 10? I've lost count. Number 3. Luther Strode. The Strange Talent of Luther Strode is a 6-issue series published by Image Comics. In the series, we meet a young boy, Luther, who discovers dormant powers through the use of an exercise manual called the Hercules Method. The manual turns out to be a magical text of sorts that awakens Luther's abilities. We discover in the series that an ominous figure called the Librarian made sure this manual found its way to Luther in an attempt to determine if Luther possessed these abilities, so that the Librarian could later help Luther to hone them. The Librarian wants to lead Luther down a path of death and destruction, while Luther has nobler intentions. In a sense, the abilities make him frighteningly strong, so much so that he can break someone's jaw with just a punch, and so durable that he can somehow fight while disemboweled. Not only is this superhero terrifying, but this comic series is also just terrifyingly fantastic. Number 2. Sentry. Marvel's fatally flawed version of Superman. Sentry is a superhero that hit the pages of comics in the early 2000s, but with a backstory that predates most of the superheroes we know today. A hero that was for some reason long forgotten. Robert Reynolds, aka Sentry, returns to the world after he fears that the Void, his arch nemesis, has also returned. Sentry is super strong, fast, near invincible, can produce powerful energy blasts, can fly, has psionic abilities, and has sometimes been known to manipulate molecules and raise the dead. Yeah. He's also the best of the best. So okay, he's super strong, but he's also super good, so why should we be scared? Because as is revealed throughout the comics, his good side comes as a package deal, accompanied by a much darker side. Robert Reynolds is not just a Sentry, but also the Void. And the world, including Robert himself, was made to forget him in an attempt to protect the world from the other half of his personality. His split personality disorder has also caused him to be one of the strongest supervillains, the Void. And Robert is a scary level of mentally unstable, to the point that in the 2006 Sentry series, he tells his therapist the Void is locked up in the Watchtower, yet the vault Sentry claims contains the villain only contains a chair and a mirror. It is later revealed that this is a psychological trick that Reynolds plays on himself to keep the darker side of himself, aka the Void, contained. Number 1. Scarlet Witch, also known as Wanda Maximoff. Scarlet Witch is the famed daughter of Magneto and twin sister to Quicksilver. If you are familiar with Marvel Comics, there is a very good chance you are familiar with Scarlet Witch. Her childhood was fraught with trauma, making Scarlet Witch an unstable mutant, which is terrifying because she is just so powerful. Scarlet Witch has reality-altering powers, but not just any 2-bit kind of reality-altering powers. We're talking about the type of powers that could change all of reality as we know it. In House of M, Scarlet Witch changed the entire universe by giving mutants all the power. Later, she agreed to undo what she had done, but also change things again when she removed mutants from all existence. I also obviously could not have a list with the Phoenix Force on it without mentioning Scarlet Witch, as during the X-Men vs. Avengers storyline, we get to see Scarlet Witch and Hope Summers team up with the Avengers to take down the Phoenix Force. After wrenching it free of Scott Summers, together, Hope and Wanda wipe the Phoenix Force out of existence. Impressive.
In the number 10 spot, we have Swamp Thing. DC Swamp Thing is extremely freaky to look at to begin with, and it's even freakier when you realize the Swamp Thing is not a transformed super person, but rather an entity who absorbed the consciousness of a scientist named Alec Holland, who had to seek refuge in the swamp after thugs invaded his facility, and he never made it out alive. Swamp Thing actually did appear in House of Secrets for a standalone horror story, as well as his own 1982 movie, which was kind of a letdown, but did go on to become a cult classic. So time for a revival, anyone? Coming in at number 9 is Deadman. Boston Brand is literally a dead man walking. The DC hero was a former trapeze artist who performed in a red costume with corpse-like makeup, already freaky. Brand was assassinated during a performance. His spirit is allowed to live on and seek justice, and he does this by passing through and possessing the bodies of the living. Fun fact as well, Deadman's debut in Strange Adventures number 205 also included the first known depiction of drugs in a comic approved by the Comics Code Authority. Next up at number 8 we have the Hulk. We're all pretty familiar with Marvel's Hulk by now, so he doesn't seem as scary to us as he really is. What truly is terrifying about the Hulk, aside from the green giant smashing thing, is that he is the product of a fractured psyche, and something a lot of us can relate to. Bruce Banner lives in constant fear that his anger will bring out the Hulk. Meanwhile, thousands of people worldwide struggle with this exact fear that their emotional damage will lead them to become someone that they're not, or do things that they regret to the people that they love. A different kind of scary, but a relatable fear nonetheless. In the number 7 spot we have Simon Dark. Simon Dark is a DC vigilante who operates out of Gotham City. In fact, he shares a name with a popular nursery rhyme in Gotham to make things more eerie. If you're good, he'll stay away. If you're bad, he'll make you pay. Even worse to know is that Simon's Frankenstein-esque appearance is due to the fact that he's composed of the bodies of 20 young boys, stitched together by a medical maniac with the help of a dark cult. Thankfully, he's chosen to use his zombie powers for good. Coming in at number 6 is Brother Voodoo. A Strange Tales alumni from 1973, Marvel's Brother Voodoo has been frequently likened to Doctor Strange, and even replaced him as Sorcerer Supreme in the New Avengers. Voodoo derives his powers from the Loa, the gods of, you guessed it, voodoo. And with that, plus his training from mentor Papa Jumbo, he has the abilities to summon the dead, mesmerize people, and you can bet he probably has a ton of those creepy pin dolls laying around. Next up at number 5 we have the Hanged Man. Image Comics' Hanged Man of Astro City haunts and watches over Shadow Hill, and he does so silently, eerily, just floating along with his head still inside a noose. He is often drawn to those who are in need of comfort after traumatic events, although I'm pretty sure the sight of a pitch black figure with a sack on its head drifting noiselessly towards me isn't going to exactly comfort me. Next up at number 4 is Shadowhawk. There are many people who have taken up the position of Image's Shadowhawk, so for this video we're focusing on one of the main representations by Paul Johnston. Paul was attacked and injected with HIV positive blood and ended up feeling like a prisoner in his own body. So what did he do with that? He took to the streets to rid them of the crime he had encountered, and in turn would break the spines of villains to leave them paralyzed, just as he felt. Easily the most sadistic superhero out there, but also one of the most complicated backstories. In the number 3 spot we have Professor X. Okay, wait a second, Professor X is like the ultimate good guy dad of Marvel, right? Well, usually yes. But have you ever imagined what it would be like to live in the same vicinity as someone whose telepathic powers are as immense as X's? Not only can he read minds, but he can control them too and alter memory, as he has done on his own team multiple times. What makes him scarier is that he will literally stop at nothing to defend his cause, and he always thinks he is doing the right thing. Well, newsflash, even villains think they are doing the right thing. For them. Coming in at number 2 is Ghost Rider. The movies really did not do Ghost Rider justice. Nicolas Cage knew this and he even declined to do a 3rd movie. That's when you know your movie kinda sucked. Focusing on the Marvel Johnny Blaze character specifically, he gave up his soul to Satan to save his father, and with that deal he became imbued with the essence of hell. Fiery motorcycle, skeletal body, and the ability to use his penance stare to make his enemies feel every bit of violence they've ever inflicted on other people. Pretty heavy, pretty spooky freaky stuff. And finally, in the #1 spot is Morbius the Living Vampire. Marvel's story of Dr. Michael Morbius is that he was a brilliant scientist whose experimentation with vampire bats went completely wrong, transforming him into a pseudo-vampire. And with being a vampire comes the uncontrollable thirst for blood, not sparkliness. Classic Dracula inspiration with a superhero twist, he is a tortured and tragic soul that isn't even safe around those he holds dear, as is obvious when he kills his oldest friend and partner Nikos. Nothing tastes better than a best friend.
In at number 10, Spectre. This deceased and then resurrected detective known as Spectre is a hero with a great power and little limitations. Spectre possesses the spirit of the gods' vengeance and is charged with punishing the guilty people of the world. He wields limitless abilities and can reshape reality, alter time, space, and change matter. So essentially he can do whatever he wants. Now imagine if he turned to a villainous lifestyle. With that kind of power he would be unstoppable, and because he's already dead, virtually invincible. Number 9, Ant-Man. While it may sound strange for Ant-Man to become a villain, think about it for a minute. He started as a petty criminal before he even became the Ant-Man, and was even arrested and sentenced to 3 years in prison. If Ant-Man began using the suit to pursue a life of crime and villainy, just imagine the damage that he could do. He could easily shrink down and weasel his way into whatever person or hero he wanted, making it easier to take out foes from the inside by destroying their internal organs without them even knowing who's responsible. Also, let's not forget when he transformed into that giant version of himself in Captain America Civil War. With that large state, he could do some serious damage. In at number 8, the Hulk. We have already seen the sheer amount of damage that the Hulk can do. He's unstable, he's powerful, and when he takes over Bruce Banner, you can kiss that logic goodbye. Now imagine if the Hulk went full evil. Good luck, society. Good luck, world. If people are constantly trying to fight him, be it military, superhero, or whoever, it would only make him more angry. And we know the angrier he becomes, the stronger he gets. If you want to see what would happen if the Hulk went to the dark side, look up the comic book storyline Future Imperfect. It shows a bearded Hulk who calls himself Maestro as he takes over the world. Sadly, the world doesn't really survive his destruction. In at number 7, Storm. Storm is quite possibly one of the strongest X-Men, and at one point was even worshipped as a goddess. She's even able to control the weather, and as a result can create catastrophic damage. The only thing preventing her from not doing this is her moral compass. If that somehow went away, she could conjure up tornadoes, blizzards, lightning storms, essentially anything she wanted to destroy the earth. You know, if global warming doesn't beat her to it. In at number 6, Batman. Bruce Wayne not only has the power of his Batman technologies, but he's also a massively wealthy figure in Gotham. Luckily for that city, he's on their side, even if his Batman costume is scary as all hell. Plus, he's literally dressed as an animal that most people have terrible nightmares from. And he as well is guided by a moral compass and is essentially against killing people, which perhaps the only reason why his enemies are still alive. Imagine if he just decided to become evil. He could potentially be Gotham's top mob boss, and not too many people could prevent it. He's a master of martial arts and a brilliant detective, so solving his crimes would be difficult in and of itself. In at number 5, Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze is inches away from becoming a villain. He's possessed by the spirit of vengeance, and while Johnny tries to make the Ghost Rider help people, the Rider is a demon that couldn't care less. If he allowed the demon to fully take the wheel, it could be very painful for any hero or regular person in his way. Mainly because he possesses the penance stare, which forces his enemy to relive the pain of every person they've hurt. Number 4, Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch possesses some very unpredictable and intensely powerful abilities, which even to the Avengers makes her a risk factor. In the comic books, she's even had her fair share of moments as a villain, most notably in the House of M when she tricked many heroes into becoming villains themselves. If she became a real villain in the MCU, things could get squirrely, especially with her ability to alter the very nature of reality itself. In at number 3, Wolverine. Although Although he is one of the good guys, Wolverine possesses a temper that even scares his teammates every now and again. His extreme senses, rapid healing, and unbreakable claws have made him a target for villains to capture and brainwash. Wolverine has been used for more evil deeds than he can probably count, always trying to manipulate him into turning into a villain. Number 2, Superman. Kal-El is upheld as the true hero of truth and justice. Because of that, we need to remind ourselves that he holds back a lot from hurting people. However, if Superman went rogue, much like he did in the comic book storyline Injustice, things would be fatal for the planet. In the comic book, he uses an authoritarian approach after reaching his breaking point and goes on to rule the planet. He's so powerful that if he were to be a villain, it would be game over for Earth. Lastly, at our number 1 spot, Charles Xavier. As we saw in Logan, Professor X killed most of the heroes on the planet in the disaster at Westchester just because his dementia was acting up. Even the government has classified him as a weapon of mass destruction. The only thing stopping him from doing purposeful evil acts is his morals and his drive to use his powers for good. If he used Cerebro, he could access every single mind on the planet and do insurmountable damage. Everything from restructuring memories to completely changing their personality.
Number 10. Bloody Mary. We all know the legend. Say Bloody Mary 3 times into a mirror and she'll come kill you. Crap, I've said it 2 times already, gotta be careful. This is a popular folktale generally used by one kid to scare his or her friends and feel cool. But she was recently introduced in the Batwoman comics, and they did a pretty good job of making her look about as scary as we always imagined. I get that she isn't objectively the most terrifying of villains, since, there are a lot of much freakier and more dangerous villains, but considering how freaked out many of us were by the legend as kids, there will always be a horrified place in my heart for Bloody Mary. Oh crap, I said the name again. No, please! Number 9. Killer Croc. While he wasn't particularly scary in the Suicide Squad film, Killer Croc would be absolutely terrifying if he was real, and closer to the comic version. Over 10 feet tall, with razor sharp teeth, looking like a freaking crocodile chasing after you trying to eat you, yeah, I would be expelling waste through every hole in my body. Sometimes villains just trigger that fight or flight response in us, and this one definitely does. Not that I think our ancestors evolved to be afraid of giant humanoid crocodile monsters, but when I see him, my biology definitely tells me to kill it with fire. Or run and hide. Probably that last one. And it probably wouldn't work. Number 8. Id the Selfish Moon. Id is just such a creep. Look at him. At best, he looks like some creepy dude who watches people changing through a telescope, and at worst, he looks like a murderous serial killer. And unfortunately, the latter is probably the more accurate option. Because if a planet doesn't excite him enough, he blows it up and snorts the dust. Something tells me if a giant angry moon showed up and asked us to entertain it or we'd die, we'd probably be a wee bit spooked. Because nobody wants to be blown up and snorted. I mean, I assume. Maybe there's someone out there who's into that, but I'm sorry, if that appeals to you, you're weird. Number 7. Saduhem. Saduhem is a Hellboy villain, one of the evil spirits known as the Ogdruhem. He takes on a number of different shapes, each scarier than the last, although normally he presents as a giant terrifying creature with tentacles and claws and suckers and all sorts of nasty things. He kinda looks like Cthulhu, who I really wanted to put on this list but wasn't sure if he'd count as a supervillain, so I went with Saduhem instead. Either way, coming upon a giant tentacle monster that just wants to eat me would be a pretty scarring experience. Number 6. Martin Mad Dog Hawkins. This is one dude that not many people know about, but he is just bone chilling. He doesn't look as scary as the others on this list and isn't as powerful or accomplished as others, but he is absurdly creepy and terrifyingly psychopathic, not to mention something that could actually happen. Hawkins was actually the man who drove Amadeus Arkham, the creator of Arkham Asylum, insane when he broke into his house, killed his wife, sexually assaulted his daughter, chopped off her head, and put it in a dollhouse as an April Fool's joke. Seeing such a twisted human being who just wants to kill women is really freaky, and the worst part is that it could actually happen. There's even a reference to him in the Arkham Asylum game where a headless statue has Mad Dog written on it. If you want to see more about him, check out Arkham Asylum: A Serious House on Serious Earth. The art is pretty intense. Number 5. Doomsday. Doomsday is definitely one of the freakiest villains out there. First of all, the dude looks terrifying, so dark and evil and spiky. His scary appearance may well have been one of his adaptations. However, not only does Doomsday look scary, but in reality he would be essentially unstoppable. Especially in our world where, we don't have Superman. Once he adapted to our bullets and explosives, it'd be damn near impossible to even scratch the creature. If Doomsday was around today, it's safe to say we'd all be living in fear, although on the bright side, we probably wouldn't be living that long anyway. Yay, silver lining! Number 4. Carnage. was kind of a tough decision between Venom and Carnage. I didn't want to have both, but definitely needed one of them. I ended up choosing Carnage partly because he looks a bit freakier and partly because he's just way more insane and murderous than Venom. Sure, Venom kills dudes and threatens to eat their brains, but a lot of the time, especially recently, he takes on more of an anti-hero role, or a hero role. On the other hand, Cletus Cassidy, and by extension Carnage, is just a straight up serial killer. So not only does he look like the stuff of nightmares, but if you ran into him, he would almost certainly kill you. But if you're lucky, he'd kill you quickly. Number 3. Styx. Styx, one of the personalities of Legion, is one of the villains that is scary both in appearance and in his abilities. First, just look at him, he's freaky. He's like the Silence from Doctor Who meets Slender Man, except he has a mouthful of sharp teeth and he's naked. So yeah, he's absurdly creepy looking. But what's more is that he can absorb your freaking soul. Just by touching you, he can absorb your soul and control your body, even able to enter the minds of powerful telepaths like Professor X. This is particularly scary for me because as a kid I always had nightmares about a dude called the Brain Sucker who sucked out your brains by touching you. And Styx is eerily similar, so he scares the crap out of me. Number 2. Joker. Joker is definitely not the scariest looking of villains. Eerie, sure. Crazy, definitely. Funny, I mean, sometimes I guess, but generally he doesn't look particularly funny. But the Joker is just so damn insane, and murderously so, that you honestly have no way of knowing what he'll do next. Will he just tell you a subtext-heavy joke about people walking across a roof? Or will he tie you to a chair, torture you, and make you laugh yourself to death? Who knows? This unpredictability, along with his undeniable genius, makes him absolutely terrifying. And if, on top of all this, you're also afraid of clowns, God help you. Number 1. Scarecrow. Considering fear is kind of the MO of Scarecrow, it's no surprise that he'd find himself on this list. Scarecrow certainly isn't the scariest looking of villains in his normal state, and when played by Cillian Murphy, he's downright dreamy. But he has a few tools to terrify at his disposal. If you ran into Scarecrow and he used his fear gas, suddenly he would become your greatest fear. And you know what they say about people's greatest fear? They're scared of it. Yep, people say that, it's a thing they say. Plus he can turn into a scare beast, a pretty freaky looking monster that naturally emits his fear gas. Now, the Scarecrow is pretty scary, but not as scary as this Scarecrow. That's me, I was in Wizard of Oz. Spooky.
In at number 10, the Poisons. This is a terrifying race of symbiotes that come to us in a 2017 Venomverse event. Their leader is none other than a turned Thanos. And the Poisons were first discovered by an alternate universe version of Doctor Strange, and they were actually given the capability for interdimensional travel by a poison Doctor Doom. These scary symbiotes are a predatory alien that actually feeds off of Clintar symbiotes and are able to disguise themselves to attract prey by looking like friends of loved ones, which is just sadistic. Number 9. Anti-Venom. This next scary symbiote may look horrific, but Anti-Venom is actually known to be a healer of sorts. And after Eddie Brock was diagnosed with adrenal cancer, the Venom suit was the only thing keeping him alive. Wanting to die with some sort of dignity, he decided to get rid of the suit. At around the same time he was working for a food bank, the owner, Mr. Lee, said he could rid Eddie Brock of his cancer. What he didn't know was that Mr. Lee wasn't who he said he was. He secretly was a supervillain known as Mr. Negative, and once he had control of the symbiote, his powers mixed with it. When the symbiote finally returned to Eddie, he was transformed into Anti-Venom. And here's the scary part, he was immune to Venom's normal weaknesses including sound, fire, and heat-based attacks. Number 8. Bizarnage. Bizarnage, a cross between DC's Bizarro and Marvel's Carnage. What's bizarro is how this scary symbiote came together. In 1996, Marvel and DC decided to do a crossover that included a crazy storyline where Spectre from DC merged with the Living Tribunal of Marvel. This merging affected everything, creating a whole new universe called Amalgam. I'm guessing that's short for amalgamation, but who knows. This saw the mix of both heroes and villains throughout both universes and led to the white mummy lookalike that we see here. This jagged and inverted coloring of Venom makes this combo one scary symbiote. Number 7. Dreadface. Also known as the symbiote who was born to cause chaos, this monstrosity begins as a combination of a gorilla and the symbiote itself. With the Clintar being a mostly non-violent bunch, this symbiote breaks the chain of command. But I'm sure if you were kept in a cube aboard the ship of a villain by the name of the Devastator, you'd be mad too. And after fighting with the Fantastic Four and even taking Ben Grimm and the Human Torch as a host, just for a while, Dreadface explains his origins. He even announces that he has been traveling from world to world in order to seek the greatest warriors, to pair with them and cause untold devastation. Number 6. Lasher. This scary symbiote gets its name from the tentacles attached to his back that it uses to lash out at its opponents. First created by the Life Foundation, which turned out to be an evil corporation hell-bent on making sure that the rich survived a potential apocalypse from the Cold War, this symbiote was meant to be part of a superhuman police force used to protect the rich. The Life Foundation kidnapped Venom and extracted 5 symbiote seeds to achieve this goal. And after Lasher's host was killed, the symbiote then bonded with the others to become hybrid. And even after the US Army was able to separate them, he bonded yet again with a trained German Shepherd, also known as War Dog. Number 5. Ultimate Venom. Now in part 1 we listed Venom at number 10 for the scariest symbiotes, but now we have something bigger and badder. I mean, just imagine seeing this in a dark alleyway. Ultimate Venom came as a result of a scientific experiment gone horribly wrong. While Peter Parker and Eddie Brock's fathers were working together on Project Venom, they were hoping to create a symbiotic biosuit that could potentially be used for good and eventually cure all illnesses. When the experiment went wrong, both Peter and Eddie's fathers were killed, and we see a clear separation from them as regards to the use of the symbiotic suit. While Peter chose to reject the seemingly out of control and violence, Eddie decided to embrace the cannibalistic Carnage, thus becoming Ultimate Venom. Number 4. Mayhem. She stands to be a daunting foe for anyone, and yeah, you heard me right, she. Mayhem is a mix of Spider-Girl and a symbiote that resulted in the first ever human symbiote hybrid. She has the strength of both Spider-Girl and a symbiote with absolutely none of the same weaknesses. However, this story is much deeper than just that. In an issue of What If back in 1998, we learned that Norman Osborn had kidnapped Mary Jane and Peter Parker's baby that was believed to be a miscarriage at the time. It turns out that Osborn had created a clone of baby May Parker and manipulated her DNA with a symbiote. She then was named April Parker, aka Mayhem. Number 3. Kron Stone. This symbiote comes to us from Venom 2099 in the far, far future, where Spider-Man is a kid called Miguel O'Hara, and his half-brother is known as Kron Stone. Kron is a bit of an evil, demented, and some would say spoiled brat because his also evil father is the executive vice president of the all-powerful Alchemax Corporation. Kron becomes Venom 2099 after killing Punisher 2099's family on his father's orders. As he tried to escape, the Punisher stabbed Stone, and as he was about to die alone in a sewer, this highly evolved symbiote slithered by and bonded with him. This particular symbiote is not to be taken lightly either. With its impressive century-long evolution into a far more superior being, he has poisonous blood and can manipulate its host molecules into a malleable liquid for shapeshifting. Number 2. Agony. Going back to the Life Foundation I mentioned before, I can't leave out this terrifying symbiote. Also known as Leslie Gesnaria, a former mercenary, she was one of the 5 people used in the superhuman police force for the Life Foundation's protection. Agony isn't just her name, it also describes what will happen to anyone who opposes this scary symbiote. With bright purple hair, razor-sharp claws, fang-like teeth, and the ability to spit acid, this symbiote is not to be messed with. Although her full potential was never fully realized, she was killed because the symbiote Scream deemed her to be inherently evil. Once the symbiote was detached from its host, however, it too became part of the monster that is hybrid. Number 1. Phage. With its orange and black coloring, this symbiote couldn't be more perfect for Halloween. Phage was also one of the special symbiote police force meant for the Life Foundation. Its host was Karl Mach, another very skilled mercenary that worked at the Life Foundation and volunteered for this program. His brooding confidence to proclaim himself the leader of the superhuman police shows just how scary he can be. He's also known for transforming his body into knives, and even had blades on his back, much like Carnage.
Starting us off at number 10, Venom. I sometimes feel a little bit bad about these symbiote lists. Venom, who's sort of the poster boy for the Clintar race, often ends up in the early numbers in our list. I mean, yeah, he's powerful, but compared to his offspring, thanks to the genetic rules of his race, he is the strongest Clintar on the block. And in terms of being the scariest, well, despite making one hell of an impression when he first hit the scene, beyond just being an alien costume, back in April of 1988 in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 299 and 3, 300, he was utterly terrifying. These days, as an anti-hero, the character is arguably one of the more scarier looking superheroes of the Marvel Universe. But Venom and artist Todd McFarlane, it's also one of the only symbiote characters to appear in the comics that doesn't have some sort of familial connection to Venom, and isn't one of his offspring, first appearing in Venom's Seed of Darkness in 1997. But despite its appearance, it went down in a pretty lackluster way, being defeated by Eddie Brock thanks to the flash on his camera. In at number 7, Riot. Riot is one of the symbiotes who makes up one of our previous numbers, Hybrid, but he's arguably scarier on his own. The character who first appeared in Lethal Protector came to be after the Life Foundation removed multiple offspring seeds from Venom in hopes to use them as super soldiers. Riot, along with his siblings, were bonded to various mercenaries that worked for the Foundation, with his being Trevor Cole. Trevor was particularly volatile, described by his peers to be unhinged, thus making Riot a much more violent and vicious symbiote compared to his siblings, which is already saying a lot. Riot would later bond with a new host in hunting down Carnage, with a group formed by the government after being retrieved from his hybrid state, which would eventually lead him and his siblings into encountering Deadpool. Riot is also making his cinematic debut in this year's Venom movie, bonding with Riz Ahmed's Dr. Carlton Drake, who runs the Life Foundation. The character's origins will obviously be slightly altered, being with a different host, but since the Venom movie is removed from the symbiote's Spider-Man alien costume storyline origin, that should be no surprise. Up next at 6, the Venomsaurus Rex. What happens when a T-Rex bonds with a Clintar? This big fella. That's what. While some of you might be like, dinosaurs are cool, consider how utterly horrific it would be to come face to face with not only a real-life dinosaur, but one with the bloodlust of a Clintar symbiote. Real-life dinosaur? Okay, sure, count me on board. But one that wants to eat my brains for sustenance? Yeah, might pass on that. There's no individuals before a new host by the name of Lee Price took over the symbiote and then reshaped it, calling themselves Maniac instead. Up next in our number 3 spot, Grendel. Grendel, compared to some of the other characters on this list, hasn't had a whole lot of panel time, but that doesn't make Grendel any less terrifying. So this creature is a dragon symbiote that was a servant of Null. More on Null later. Grendel would take on Eddie Brock's Venom and Miles Morales' Spider-Man in the 2018 Venom run, Volume 4. Grendel has the blood of multiple civilizations on his, I guess, teeth, not really hands. It ravaged societies during the earlier medieval period, including Norse soldiers, which caused Thor to trap it inside of a glacier in response. Flash forward to 1966. S.H.I.E.L.D. discovers Grendel and ran many an experiment on it, which ultimately led to a bunch of destruction by Grendel in Vietnam during the war. It would later be incapacitated and put to sleep until it was awakened by Null and unleashed on New York. See, there's a trend there with these symbiotes going after New York. To make matters worse, this symbiote dragon isn't affected by sonic waves or heat, and rather was defeated thanks to Thor's lightning and Spider-Man's Venom Blast, which caused it to destabilize and unravel into a giant amorphous mass. Man, I hate when I unravel into a giant amorphous mass. Not a good day. In at number 2, Null. Null may not look as scary as any of our previous numbers on this list initially, but it's more so his capabilities that make him utterly terrifying. Null is often considered as the symbiote god. He's the deity that created the Clintars, an origin that was crafted in that 2018 Venom run. And long story short, Null's existence predates that of the universes. Back when the Celestials had created the universe, Null had some serious beef with them, and fought against them with a living sword called the All Black, that was created from his shadow. He chopped off one of their heads and was cast back into the void by the other Celestials in retaliation. But Null used that severed Celestial head to forge a symbiote sword and symbiote armor, right from the eldritch darkness that he commanded, and set out on a mission to kill all of the other gods. When coming out of the void, he landed on a desolate planet, and created an army of symbiotes, who would later rebel against him. They imprisoned him in the core of their planet, which they would call Clintar, which is their word for cage. So if that isn't enough to vouch for why this dude is scary, I mean, he's a literal god, who has divine physiology, is self-sustaining. He's immortal and has lived for over 13.7 billion years, he can shapeshift, create life, and also wants to commit mass genocide. So yeah, not an overly pleasant being to encounter. Finally, in at number 1, Carnage. Carnage may not be able to compete with a god in terms of power, but it would be criminal to not give the symbiote the top spot on our list. He's by far the most terrifying, nefarious, and sinister of the symbiotes, and has the aesthetic to match. Carnage has one of the most interesting stories of the symbiotes in the Marvel Universe too. Eddie Brock had landed himself in prison at one point, and had the unfortunate experience of having an individual named Cletus Cassidy as his cellmate. Cassidy was a psychotic murderer, serving 11 life sentences at the time. Now at this point, it was believed that the Venom symbiote was dead, but turns out he was just incapacitated. It eventually rebonded with Eddie once more, allowing him to break out of prison. But without Eddie knowing, Venom had done something. It left behind one of its spawn in the prison, which ended up bonding with Cassidy, making him the 999th naturally born symbiote. Thus, Carnage was born, and he was much bigger and much badder than Venom. Cassidy, being such a ruthless and contemptuous killer, made Carnage even more so, and over a period of several months he would go on a killing spree, leaving the words "Carnage rules" in blood at the scenes of his crimes. Carnage has been a long-lasting character in the Venom mythos, an antagonist to the character always trying to kill his father since first appearing in Amazing Spider-Man issue 345 back in 1991.